Welcome to our next session for the Velocity X Innovation Hackathon. So tonight, we're going to be talking about project management. I'm Jeffrey Hunt. I am the Endowed Faculty of Innovation here at CSL. And this evening, we are going to have Byron Brezina, who is a professor in the engineering program at CSL, come and talk to us on this subject. So I don't want to take too much time, but I want to welcome you for attending, and I'm going to turn things over and allow him to get started with his presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. So again, my name is Byron Brezina. I'm a professor, the engineering program coordinator, and we'll let somebody else in here at CSM. And my background is I'm a mechanical engineer, project manager. I worked for the Navy for 30 some years doing engineering and project management, and then I took on now doing a second career at the college as a teacher and coordinating the engineering program. So it looks like Amanda joined us. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
as usual, we're struggling a little with the technology here, but we're going here. So Jeff had asked me to do this in support of the Velocity X Innovation Hackathon to talk about project management. Didn't really give me any, hey, you need to do this or that. So he said, just figure it out. And so what I've done is I've kind of come from the approach that the audience don't know much or anything about project management. So if you already do, and it's like, seems too simple, I apologize, but we can go through it, and then we can go from there and get more into it with questions or whatever if we need to. So that sound like good ground rules there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we wanted to ask any questions, do we send the question through the Zoom chat, or wait until there's an opening to ask the question?
Hey, it's a small group here. I think we can. I'm looking at my speaker volume. I was going to try and turn it up because I can hear you guys pretty good, but we can go along as we can take questions as we go, don't you think, Joe?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Or you can put them in the chat if you want, and we can catch them.
Yeah.
Afterward.
You're gonna be here. Yeah, you can. Jeff can run. I can't do two things at the same time. Yeah, that's fine. And mine's going to be more from the project management perspective. Obviously, not really so much. Not particularly focused on the exact project that you're looking at. I tried to keep it, since I know about it, but I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I tried to gear it for what I saw the scope of this project being, and so on. So, but between the two of us, we can answer questions. So, okay, so at any time Jeff will monitor. You can raise your hand or just cut in. So I like to start with the definition of what it is I'm supposedly talking about. So I started with what is a project, and the Project Management Institute, which is kind of the leading certification body in the United States, well, and worldwide, I think, says that it's a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. So projects have a definite starting point and a definite ending point. And you're done when you've attained the objectives that have been defined prior to the start of the project. So a project doesn't go on and on like say production, right? That's producing something on an assembly line or whatever, how you're producing it is not a project. A project has a starting point A and an ending point B. And that helps helps us define what is a project and what isn't, and then what we can apply project management to versus other types of management. So projects can be short and simple, requiring a team of, well, actually one or a few people, to long and complex projects that could be thousands of people. So, we always like to say painting a room is a project, right? You have to, get the paint, you have to get the other materials and tools, and you can't start painting until you have the paint, and what if the paint's not in stock, and so on. So it's one of the simplest forms of a project. At the same time, putting a person on the moon and getting them back, that's also a project. Now that's obviously way at the other end of the spectrum. I think the Velocity X project is definitely more towards the simple side of the spectrum, but still, a significant project in itself. It's more than painting a room, but it's certainly not a moonshot. I have this graphic on here from the project. It's known as the project management body of knowledge put out by the PMI, the Project Management Institute, and they're in their 7th edition. They've been around since the 80s. And they give guidance for all the processes and all that project managers use. And just recently, in the past few years, they've created the standard for project management, and it's actually an ANSI, American National Standards Institute / PMI standard. So, and they kind of bundle these together. So those are available out there. They're not free, unfortunately, unless you're a member and all that stuff. So, so that is the definitive, in my opinion, the definitive. Here are the principles and the processes defined for managing, projects from small to large. Okay, slide. So if we know we have a project, then we can apply project management principles, tools, processes to it. So project managers apply that knowledge, skills, and tools, techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. Now, again, that's the formal gist of the definition from PMI. A simpler way of saying it is getting the job done on time within budget according to the specifications or the scope that the project has. And project managers are constantly managing to the project management triangle of schedule, cost, and scope, which are basically your overarching constraints, and realizing that when one of those changes, for the better or worse, that the other two follow suit. So if your scope changes, obviously, if it becomes larger, your cost and schedule is going to go up. If your boss or the project, organization that you're doing the project for wants to cut costs, well, guess what? The scope's probably going to have to be cut, and so forth. So we call that the triple constraint, and you see it in other things, and it's where the term fast, good, or the saying fast, good, or cheap comes from, right? You can have any two of those. You can't have all three. So we're, project managers are constantly trading these off to try and bring the project in as agreed to. So next slide there. So is project management necessary? You see arguments on both sides. It probably started coming into vogue in the past 50 years or so, with big, large, complex projects. The project management organizations like PMI came into being in like the 80s. And again, they certify project managers and program managers, and I think they have a few others there. But so I definitely believe we need project management. And here's some reasons. And these all apply to the Velocity X project, which is, again, a fairly small project in the big scheme of things. So first, having a project manager establishes that single point of contact and accountability for the project. That project manager is normally managing resources, people from different parts of his or her company. And it may not be that they all have their own bosses, and they are doing, their specific part of the project. So having that one person that's overseeing everything is a big plus. That project manager focuses on meeting the customer needs and expectations. I mean, he or she is the forward facing, usually towards the customer. It's been proven that project management has increased performance in time, cost, and technical areas. That whole that triple the project management triangle there, because you're managing those, understanding that how they push and pull on one another. And a big one is the risk management. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. That having a good risk management approach can help you avoid disasters that could sink the project. And so overall, project management provides a disciplined approach to accomplishing projects. Okay, again, I'm still kind of sticking with the PMI stuff here, and then I'm going to bring it into the reality of, okay, here's what I think would be appropriate for a project of the size that you guys that has been advertised is looking for proposals for. So PMI and the PMBOK breaks their project management processes into 5 groups, and there are literally hundreds of project management processes. So if you really want to get into this, you can look at the standard from ANSI and PMI, and you can look at the PMBOK and really get into it. I think it can be a little overwhelming for the first time project manager or wannabe project manager. And I don't think all that is necessary for this project. So that's the good news. So they break them into the processes into an initiation stage, planning, which is what anybody's planning or proposing should be in now, and hopefully this will influence the your thinking about the planning, and then the actual execution, actually carrying out the tasks that you've identified. And I have the monitoring and controlling as a box around the planning and executing, because obviously there's a feedback loop. You're executing, now you need to change, you see something you haven't thought of, or there's a need for a change, you go back, you do some more planning, then you roll that into the executing, and that's kind of a feedback loop there. And then eventually you get to the point where, okay, we've accomplished the objectives, and we come out of that loop, and we close the project, which is a process in itself. There's a certain formality to saying, hey, the project is done. In engineering, we have that design loop where we're trying to constantly make the design better and better and better. And then eventually we're told to stop because you have no more money, you must finish this, and that's the point where management calls that shooting the engineer and getting on with it. So, but it's the same type thing, it doesn't go on forever.
So there's a question in the chat.
Oh, okay,
Maybe you could address while we're here, actually.
I gotta get up and look at it.
About the previous slide.
How do project managers choose to manage each of the three? Well, that's the challenge to it. You're starting off with, once you've done your planning, put in your proposal, and you come to an agreement with the customer, which in this case would be the Velocity Center, whoever. You've agreed, you've signed up for, there's been an agreement on a certain cost, a certain schedule, and a certain scope of work, okay? And then you have a plan for that, and a plan is a plan, it's a starting point, and hopefully you've accounted for everything and looked at risk and everything. But then as you start executing the project, and the reality of, okay, wow, this costs a little bit more than we thought, this is taking a little bit longer than we thought, that's sort of the gist of what a project manager does, is to keep that to keep the project within scope, within cost, within schedule, or if it can't be, letting the customer know, okay, we've got some issues here we need to discuss. Whether that's a schedule slip, or there's cost overruns, and there's scope stuff that maybe something was harder than you thought it was going to be, and there has to be some discussion on pieces of what makes up the scope of the project. But you're doing all three of those at the same time is the basic answer, and that's what that's how project managers earn their living, is being able to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get to the situation on the ground here. Velocity X. So is project management needed for this project? I'd say yes, because it is a project. It has a $25,000 budget. It is very visible too, when you think about it. This isn't something you're developing back in a laboratory somewhere that that people aren't going to, oh, what's really going on in here? This is going to be out there on 210. And I was thinking the other day, for some motivation, you're going to have 2,000 people going up 210 every day about 8 o'clock, passing by and looking at it, and then talking about it at work, and then coming home the other way from the base down here. So this is out there. It's going to be very visible, and if it was me, I want to have it planned out, and so we're advancing. And because if something goes wrong, everybody's going to see it. Now that's not the only motivation. I mean, and things can certainly go wrong, but this is not something is being done behind the curtain until it's perfect and ready. So you want to have a good plan. I think about a good project and a bad project, and I may be dating myself, but road construction. If you remember the Wilson Bridge replacement, maybe you guys are old enough to remember that, maybe not. That project will probably go down in history as one of the better executed projects. It came in under budget, under schedule, I think. There were no big disasters with it, right? And then contrast that to what was known as the mixing bowl, which is where over in Virginia, where the Beltway and 95 split off, and 95 goes south to Richmond. That was a total unmitigated disaster, and it got bad press, and it was just it was a mess. And they restarted it, they reorganized a couple times or whatever. It's just a mess. So you can have, and those are big projects, millions of dollars. So you can have projects that are out there for everybody to see that are successes, And the mixing bowl finally got fixed, right? But not until like cost overruns, schedule overruns and all that. And I don't have all the details on that, but they were significant. They were, I think it was years and it had to be millions of dollars, so. So anyway, back to this, so the question is, project management is needed, but the question is how much? So I think you can do this project without having to go and learn the project management body of knowledge, without becoming a certified project management professional, without, all that, or without, hiring a fancy project manager, whatever. And I think that how much project management is needed, I think some basic planning and maybe the use of something, a very popular project management tool, the Gantt chart, which is showing there on the right. I think it really helps you organize things. You get a lot of bang for the buck out of doing one, where you sit down with your team and say, okay, what needs to be done for this idea we have? What resources do we need to complete each of those things? We'll call them tasks that need to be done. What people, what materials, when I say people, I mean labor, what's it going to cost to pay the people to do it? What are the materials we need? Things of that nature. When will each task need to be done? Okay, and then with that question, you're starting to set up your schedule. Okay, first thing we need to do is this, and then after that's done, then we need to do this, and it kind of, starts flowing, and you get it on the first pass through, you get an idea of, okay, we just came up with a 6-month schedule. Okay, now you haven't specified a schedule for this, so
No, and
that's
something that will come after the winning idea has been determined,
Okay.
essentially, because they'll have to find a reasonable length of time
right.
for that to take place. So
But
that's
it
something
could be-
that'll happen later.
Right, but you're requiring a schedule in the proposal.
So it would be, yes, it would be a wonderful idea to include a schedule in the proposal. That way, the people on the panel will know if you plan for your project to take 2 months, or you plan for your project to take 6 months.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So that's actually good for the proposers, because you're not being told it has to be done by, May the 1st or whatever. And who is responsible for each task? And I think if you look closely at the right side of the Gantt chart, what they've done is they put people's initials there, like who's responsible for each activity under the task. And that can break down further to sub activities. And you notice there that it's not just a serial activity 1, activity 2, activity 3, that you have overlaps there. And so, the next step with the Gantt chart is to, once you've got the task on there, the activities, is to set up the dependencies. In other words, hey, I can start activity 2 once activity 1 is, 75% done. Or I can't start activity 2 until activity 1 is all the way done. And so you have those different relationships. And again, you're trying to keep your schedule as short as possible. But my advice to you is if you're proposing the schedule, be conservative, and then don't things always take longer than you think they're going to take, sitting around the table, like kind of, brainstorming it. Gantt charts, you can do them in Excel. You don't have to have fancy project management software. I also think there's free stuff out there. I didn't sign up for any to see what the catch was, but I think there's free stuff out there. You'd sign up and who knows, they're probably going to try and sell you something, but you get to use this free Gantt chart maker. But you can do it in Excel, or you can do it by hand if you want to. Okay. Next slide. So along with that planning and producing that Gantt chart, which is going to force you to look at things like how long, what tasks need to be done, what materials do we need, all that. I think to talk about risk is an important part, and this can get a little bit complicated, but I was going to try and keep it on the simple side here. So risk planning is basically asking yourself, your team asking, what can go wrong? And what will we do if it does? And some of the things I saw that kind of caught my eye here, it just from the description of the project, and I'm not saying these are risks or not, but I mean, to me, they, you know, they could be. I saw things like compliance. That's a loaded term, compliance. You know, we have compliance officers and all, making sure we're complying with whatever it is we're supposed to be complying to, but I saw compliance as like permits and environmental rules and things like that. So if it was me, I don't know a whole lot about that stuff. I would identify that as a risk and something that we can mitigate, which I'll talk about by just getting smart on it. You know, finding out, okay, what permits are required, what am I gonna be, are we gonna be held to environmental standards or whatever? Another one I saw, which was accessibility, okay? And by that, I think they mean that, you know, it's accessible to people with disabilities or whatever. You know, it's an outside thing. You would think maybe that is going to be something that doesn't have to be. I don't have a preconceived notion of what this thing's going to look like, but if people are going to interact with it somehow or even walk around, you know, the Americans with Disabilities Act, there's probably going to be accessibility requirements on it, and I don't think I've ever seen an accessibility requirement that didn't cost money to implement. Some of it may be common sense. So that was another thing I saw that, you know, that could be a cost risk and a schedule risk, but that's just to give you an idea. Other types of risk are the materials we're looking at. Are they in, are there things that are going to take a long time to, once you order them, to come in? You know, long lead items, things like that, So a risk is an event that disrupts a project. It's something that occurs, and we define them by defining that event, naming that event or that could happen, and then we try to assess them by looking at the probability that that specific event will happen, and then the impact of that event happening on the project. So you could have something that has a high probability, hey, this is probably going to happen, but the impact is so low that my overall risk assessment for that is low. I don't know if you can see that on that little 3x3 matrix there. On the other hand, something could have a very low probability of happening with a high impact, and that could also be considered a low. Now, on the other end of the scale is something that has a high probability of happening and a high impact. That's a high risk to the project, and that's something you need to be focused on, keeping track of, trying to control or mitigate it from happening. And then you have the in-betweens, like the medium risk. Okay, so the idea here is, again, with this type of project, you're not going to have 20 risk, I don't think. I think you're going to have a handful that you're going to be have identified that maybe you're in the medium or high area that you need to deal with. And the 4 ways to deal with risk are to avoid them, which is just, okay, this high risk was a function of us going with a certain piece of this design or certain material or something. Let's just avoid it and find another way to do that. Just avoid it, you know. You've got just get rid of it and come up with something that may not be as good or may detract from the design, but takes that risk away and meaning that you can stay on schedule and within cost. A lot of times with the risk we're tracking, we try to control or mitigate them. Mitigate's the big word, but it's basically control. In other words, like the accessibility thing, you can mitigate that by somebody getting smart on what are the requirements for accessibility. Who do I need to talk to? What age, what, I don't know if it's an agency, but, do we need to talk to a consultant who can tell us whatever, there's ways to do it. The third way of dealing with risk is just to accept it. And that's like, okay, if it happens, it happens, we'll worry about it then. So I don't recommend that for medium or high risk, but certainly for low risk, that may be a way to go. And then the fourth one is probably not applicable to transfer risk. Is like we transfer when we buy home insurance, we transfer risk of our home being blown down in a hurricane by buying insurance, right? And we know we're insured and we can. So that's normally like a cost thing or something that could be built into the contract to share that risk with the customer or whatever. So it's mainly those first three there. Okay. So I don't know, I've been doing a lot of talking. I think that the takeaway here is that project management provides a disciplined approach to accomplishing projects. I think it's applicable to this project. And project management can keep your project from turning into this next slide here. You see this a lot in different forms, but the 6 phases of a project where you start off, if you don't have a well-defined project that you're using project management with, everybody's all enthusiastic at the beginning, and then it turns into disillusionment, panic as we find out, hey, we're over cost, we're over schedule, we can't do what we said we were going to do. And then the rest is kind of sarcastic, but it happens in organizations. Find the guilty, we don't find them, so we'll punish the innocent, and then we'll praise and honor or promote the non-participants. I meant to say this earlier. I think you can see this.
Share.
It's in the reference. It's in the references in the back of it. You can go to the last slide or questions. So you can go to the last slide and we'll go back to questions. So I meant to mention this earlier. It's a book. It's still in print. I saw it on Amazon. It's $19. I've had it for 20 years, or a little less than 20 years. It's called Just Enough Project Management. It's a quick read, and it's great for small projects like this. It kind of boils it all down and says, okay, here's what's important. Here's the reality of, for small to medium projects. So you don't have to become a project management expert, for a small project. I refer to it all the time, and I have it sitting beside my technical project management book. I didn't bring that, how we learned it in the 80s, which is like 300 pages and that thick. This is just as good for just about any project. So that's available. And those are the references for the PMBOK and the standard I mentioned. So anyway, so we're open for questions, and we'll stay here as long as you like.
So if there are any questions out there, feel free to unmute yourselves and say something or put a question in the chat.
Okay. Do you have any tips on managing projects? Like for example, like during the planning process, what do you recommend that a person does first? Do they search up the cost, or do they figure out the schedule?
Yeah, so the first thing I would do is Google, so you have to manage a project. Because you're probably going to find lots of good like free stuff out there. A book like this, again, I don't know if people even buy books anymore. They had a Kindle edition, but I'm old school. Finding a short to the point book like this is good, but actually where to start? Well, you're starting, you need to understand the requirements that are out there. Okay, and there's 4 things here. That they want for the proposal. I think that, and understand that it's a 40,000 square foot space. You know, I've seen it before, but I was looking at it coming in tonight. I mean, that's an acre. It's a big space, right? Now, that's not saying you have to use it all, right?
Wow.
You know, it could be just the opposite. It could be, you know, hey, you know, we've got this little microscopic thing there that is so innovative. I don't know. And then that's the draw. You come expecting to see this big thing, and you know, I have all types of dumb ideas. So I think those questions that I posed, and again, a lot of that comes, right? I mean, it's not that this guy thought them up himself, but you know, what do I need to do? What tasks do I need to do this? What materials? Now, we haven't really talked about it, but project management aside, I'm not on the panel that's going to decide. But I mean, in my mind, a great idea goes a long way. Okay, that you can have a killer idea and be okay on the project management or need some help with the project management side of it, and you know, you still might be okay. Am I stepping out of line saying that, Jeff?
So the thing is that, you know, there will be certain things that projects will be scored on. And of course, a couple of things to keep in mind. You know, if you say, oh, our projected budget is $100,000, well, obviously that probably eliminates you because that's outside of the budget.
Right.
If you say it's going to take us 5 years to complete the project, and somebody else says, hey, we can do this in 60 days, they probably have an advantage in that area if they have an idea that's equally as good. So, you know, it's one of those things that you really need to think about what it is you want to do and come up with a great idea. Because of course, without a great idea, you're really going nowhere. But you also, in the back of your mind, you need to have those other things when you come up with your great idea. Will it fit within the budget?
Yeah.
Will it fit within a timeline that is reasonable?
Right. So it starts with the idea.
Yes.
I mean, it starts with the idea, and I would imagine, you know, the creative types are looking at this, and maybe those creative types, not necessarily, but maybe they don't have as much skill on the project management side. But it starts with that creative idea, like looking at the space there. It's beside a major road. What's your idea for it? I wish I had some great. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. I'm not. I mean, it takes more of the artsy, that type of person to think about that and what this could be. I'm more on the side of, okay, the idea came from another person, and then I could help them kind of flush that out.
Yeah.
Not that I'm available to help, but because my fee is $25,000. So what can I say? So but so it kind of takes at least a 2-person team, I would think, of the creative person and then the business person who's okay. If if they are not a project manager, they're going to take care of that. They're going to figure out what needs to be done, or if they need to bring a 3rd person onto the team and let the idea person have at it and come up with something really cool. That's the really great thing about this. You've got a blank canvas out there to do something with.
Right, and it's an opportunity to really be creative.
Yeah.
And hopefully in this, there will be groups that they will take someone who is really creative and have a great idea and pair them up with another person or more people who can do things like track the costs.
Yeah.
And make sure that it looks like the project is something that's doable. And so that's part of the thing, is you really need to think about not only what is your idea, but who do you have on your team who can actually, in the end, make this come into being. So, other questions out there?
Yeah,
So,
excuse me.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Deontay.
No, go.
As far as we were talking about risk, so some things were going through my mind, like, is CSM responsible for the safekeeping of whatever might develop, or who's responsible for whatever gets put there?
So ultimately, the upkeep of that will not be the problem of the teams. So that is going to be something that the upkeep of that will be worked out between CSM and ETC, who are putting on the event.
And who is ETC? Just curious.
So ETC is actually located here within the Velocity Center. So last week, Matt Martin did a session on cost tracking. He happens to be the chief financial officer of ETC.
And ETC stands for what again?
Uh,
Energetics Technology Center?
Energetics.
Oh,
There you go. Yeah. You're going to ask me about there.
I think it's Energetics Technology Center.
Yeah.
They're a group, a nonprofit group that helps.
Yeah. Energetic Technology Center.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
The base is based around, the Indian Head base is based around energetics, propellants and explosives and all that. And they're kind of an industry nonprofit group that helps spur innovation and projects and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But I think the good news is that once your project's over, right, once it's done, then you're out of it, you know?
Yeah, I
Unless-
was just more so thinking, like, in addition to the upkeep and the safekeeping, like, part of that is the cost of an electric bill possibly, and I was thinking, who would that go to? Because I'm trying to factor that in to my planning, the budget, like that sort of thing.
So you said electric, the cost to power it.
Yeah, as part of the upkeep.
No, that's
Yeah.
you. But now if it's gonna cost, $1,000 a month to power it, then I would think that the evaluation team would look at that and say, well, so it would have to be reasonable, right? And something they could turn on and off or whatever, but.
Right. And
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm asking who. Do we know who's gonna be responsible for that?
Yes.
yeah, that, like I said, that's going to be, CSM and ETC are working those things out. So that will be their problem to do
Okay.
that. But
Gotcha.
also that's something that would be considered by the panel when they look at the project. If you say, we're going to put in this and there's essentially no upkeep cost to it for the next 5 years versus someone who says, I'm going to put in a flashing billboard and the cost is going to be $1,000 a month to pay the electric bill, then that's going to influence, I would assume, the panel's decision.
Yeah, I was just curious because if I have a certified electrician or say a SMECO representative come out there and I need a quote from them, they're gonna need to know who's gonna be paying the bill so that they know where the electric's coming from.
Right, yeah.
So is it like the building? Can I just tell them the building that's the Velocity Center
Yeah, and
since they're both there?
if you have specific questions like that, you can always send an email. My contact information is on the page for the event. You can always send me an email. I'll make sure those questions get to the right place so we can get answers on those things.
Okay.
But that's a great example of mitigating a risk. You're already doing it. I mean, this stuff doesn't just start at some arbitrary point. You're already thinking about this, and that's a great example of controlling that risk by asking the questions that you have, having somebody come out and look at it and all that. So that's good question.
Thank you. That's all I got.
Okay. Anything else?
For the previous there was a previous Zoom meeting before this. Um, where can I find the recording for that?
It is, I don't know if it's been put up yet or not, but it will be put up on the page for the event. There should be a link there to view the previous.
Okay. If I have any other questions, like if tomorrow I find any other questions, do I email you or
Yes, you can email me. Like I said, my name is Jeffrey Hunt. My email address is on the page for the event, but it's actually JAHUNT, the number 2 at csmd.edu. So if you have questions, you can either email me that way, or you can find the link to me on the page where the event, where the recording for the last event should be posted as well.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, good luck.
Well, thank you all for attending and hope you do well in the contest. Looking forward to seeing what kind of great ideas we have come out of this. Should be exciting. So in the meantime, like I said, if you have any questions about anything, feel free to send me an email, reach out. I'll be glad to get information for you, get back to you. But otherwise, last opportunity for questions. If there are none, then
Nope. Thank you, gents. I appreciate it.
all right,
Okay.
you'll have a great
Good luck
evening.
with that.
We'll see you later.